September 10, 2014 meeting of the Metro Vision Issues Committee. We thank you all very much for your flexibility and your cooperation in meeting for what is for us a special meeting time, and particularly in light of the fact that we had made some representations to you at our last meeting that we assumed it was to be the last meeting of the year, but we have been advised that it is appropriate for us to meet now. It's only fair to say that the actual reason is that I was so moved by the stirring words of tribute that Commissioner Jones issued at the last meeting concerning my service as your chair that we wanted one more opportunity for a similar encomium to be delivered. That having been said, we have a sign-in sheet that is being circulated. Please, if you would sign in to that. We have a fair amount of business, but I believe we'll handily meet our 2-hour time limit. And we appreciate also the earlier time. As some of you know, the Metro Mayor's Caucus and Metro Area County Commissioners is holding its annual legislative reception this evening, and we did not want to interfere, at least unduly, with that reception. At this point in time, we turn ourselves to public comment, and we would recognize anyone who would like to make a public comment to the Metro Vision Issues Committee. Please note that we will not accept and would ask you to respect and not make any public comment on issues for which a prior public hearing has been held before the Board of Directors. That having been said, is there anyone who would like to be recognized at this time for purposes of public comment? Please, if you'd come forward. Please, and Myron, if you'd introduce yourself and let everyone know who you are and what we're here to hear from you.
Okay. Well, thank you for this opportunity. My name is Myron Hora. I'm the Planning and Environmental Manager for CDOT Region 4. I'm here to make a request of you regarding your action item, item number 4, on the recommendation, not so much on the first phase selection, but on the recommendation for the allocation of the remaining Phase 1 funds. We're currently working on a project between 120th and State Highway 7. We're trying to get as far north as we can. We have $55 million of ramp funds that we're working with to do this. It's a managed lane project extending the work that's going on now. We are having a funding shortfall, so I'm here to request that you consider allocating some funds to that project as part of that remaining Phase 1 discussion. Right now we're facing a funding shortfall of $33 million just to get to E470. We've been working with Region 1, HPTE, RTD on trying to develop a funding package, and what this would be is part of that funding package to help us leverage every bit of funding that we can get to put together to complete this project. The way I see it, there's a couple of different options that you could look at as you're having this discussion. One, you could say this is a viable project, we think it's a good project, and we'd like to go ahead and allocate $5 million out of that remaining funds to go to I-25. And the reason I'm at that $5 million figure is because that's what was put into the current project being built from US 36 to 120th. Or you could say, hey, let's go ahead and let that money roll into Phase 2, which seems like it has historically happened, but you could let that money roll over there and say, TAC, DRCOG staff, we'd like you to include I-25 as part of your scenario development for how that Phase 2 project selection would go. And so I just appreciate your consideration of this matter, and I'll be here if any questions come up later.
Thank you very much, Myron. We appreciate your comment. Is there anyone else for public comment? Please.
Good afternoon, MVIC. Scott McCary with Boulder County Transportation Department. I'm the Multimodal Division Manager for the Transportation Department. I'm speaking about the Phase 1 allocations for the bike ped category. if you look at the funding that's been allocated thus far, there's a remaining $679,000 left in there. And it's my understanding that DRCOG has long had a precedent that they look at the next project in line that wasn't able to be fully funded, and they contact that agency to see if they would like to be partially funded. And we had a peer review session with DRCOG staff, I think on November 13th, where we kind of went over the operations of how that works. And so that's my best understanding of how that works. If you look at what's next in line, the City of Boulder could be partially funded, but they were contacted and actually declined to be only partially funded. It would have been only about 11%. The second next in line, continuing that precedent, is Superior. And Superior has a project for $600,000. And that project could thus be fully funded with the kind of remaining that's in the bike ped category. So I guess I would request today if there could be a discussion about you know, if this is indeed the precedent to contact the next in line agency, and if that is kind of how things have been going, if we could consider that for Superior's project, which is second in line. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. We appreciate that. And further comment? Yes.
Alex Arnello, and to follow on Scott's request, I'm the Public Works Director for the town of Superior, and we submitted that grant application for the trail project. Happens to be just it's a small project, $600,000, and it's not only a trail project, but it also includes a bike shelter as part of the first and final mile recommendations from the sustainable communities. There's a bike shelter as well as far as the trail project, and we think it's a very high priority project, and there's just enough money if you don't fund the City of Boulder's project to fund the next in line, which would be our trail project. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Any other comments from the public at this point? Hearing none, then we'll turn to item number 3 on our agenda. The summary of the November 5, 2014 meeting has been provided to you. Those are provided for informational purposes only. We do not take action on the minutes here at MVIC, but do please feel free if you have any outstanding important issues to share them with Connie, and I'm sure they can be reflected, but in the meanwhile they are simply presented for your information. With that, we turn to our single action item, number 4, and this is to move to recommend to the Board of Directors approval of the 2016-2021 Transportation Improvement Program first phase projects and the allocation of the remaining first phase funds. Just very briefly, so that you know, you'll recall that we created some time ago the concept of the first phase and the second phase with a 75% deposit into the first phase, 25% for second phase. Staff will now report to us relative to the result of their analysis and scoring for the phase 1 projects, which is the only thing that is on our agenda this afternoon, in addition to allocating remaining funds for availability to phase 2. And for that, I'm pleased to recognize Doug Rex, who is our Director of Transportation Planning and Operations. Good afternoon, Mr. Rex.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Really do appreciate that. And first of all, I would like to thank you all, the committee, for accommodating us today. I know this is a busy time of year, and this is not a scheduled meeting, and Lord knows I know you probably rather be out buying my Christmas gift. I know Jackie already has it, so. She hasn't talked to me since I rescheduled this meeting. No, but anyway, I really do appreciate it, and I know you understand the magnitude of where we need to get with this tip in order to get it signed, sealed, and delivered later on in 2015. So, without further ado, let's just go through where we are with phase 1 currently. As everybody knows, we did a call for project in the summer, and that closed in September, on September 19th. and over a 2-month period, staff was busy, you know, evaluating those projects for eligibility, completeness, and scoring. We got that done in the early part of November. And we, as what's typical with our process, we asked for volunteers through our TAC, our Technical Advisory Committee, excuse me, to serve on a peer review panel to meet and just basically, you know, meet with staff, and so we can go over and explain to them what our interpretation is, to go over the adjustments in scoring that we made, to make sure that the adjustments were appropriate. And you know, they were good enough to move forward with to TAC. And at that meeting, there were no objections to the staff application. You know, we did have certainly some discussion on items, and we presented some information which we are also going to present to you here today. I'll talk about that here in a minute on a couple criteria items. But after that time, we reached out and contacted all member local governments that submitted projects, and the reason we did that is because we didn't want there to be any surprises, of course, once the list is published and available to TAC and to you all. So we reached out. We didn't necessarily talk to everybody, but we provided the opportunity. We left voicemails when we couldn't get a hold of to reply back, but I think we talked to most. So that takes us to the list, and that is Table 1 in your handouts. And it really boils down to 3 different categories of projects in here. You'll see that within the table itself, you know, it's listed by project type, right? So the first project type you see is bicycle pedestrian, and within that, the green highlighted section, and just to refresh your memory, the way we score in first phase is based on the scoring. So they're listed in rank order, and we go down as far as we can with the money that's available by that project type. So the green that is highlighted within that table are ones that are well, I guess recommended for funding in first phase. Now there were situations in which when we get to you know, we get down through the list and there was a project that there's maybe only, say there's $3 million left, right? Or it's $3 million left, but the project maybe costs $8 million. In that case, what we did, we went out and we asked that member local government if they were willing to take a lower federal amount. In other words, if their project was scalable, that they could basically use that lower federal amount, or, you know, if it wasn't scalable, to overmatch that with some other funding source. And in cases where they did agree with that, we showed that project in green, but we also show the remainder, the balance of the project, balance of the request that was still outstanding. We show that in blue, and that blue makes it eligible for second phase. So they can there's still the possibility that they can make that project whole in second phase. But of course, that is, you know,
and Doug,
deliberation we'll have at a future
there are
time.
just the 2 projects that I think you pointed out on this Table 1 where that actually occurred. So rather than being intimidated by the description,
no, that's
if you
exactly
just turn to
right.
the second page of Table 1, there's just those 2. There's a Denver project for MLK under roadway capacity, and then there's the Arapahoe County project for Iliff Avenue corridor under roadway operational improvement, and that's where that spillover occurs that you just described. Is that right?
That's exactly correct.
Thank
you, sir, very much.
Excuse me, could I ask another follow-up question on that, just so I understand it? Doug, aren't all of the projects that weren't funded in Phase 1 eligible for Phase 2 funding? So can you just distinguish why these 2 projects are different than everything else?
Well, they're different just simply because the full amount was not funded in first phase. There's a portion, like for example, the Denver Martin Luther King project, their request was $8.5 million, and when we came down to that project, there was only $7.172 million left, and we contacted Denver, and they said they would accept that portion.
Okay, so basically it's just it's a portion of the other project that's the remaining funding. Okay,
Exactly.
I understand that.
Yeah.
That's what distinguishes them. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yeah, but you're right though, Jackie.
On the blue line, I think it says remaining amount. And if you just look at that, you'll just see it's just
Right.
the spillover.
Right, it was just his words that said,
Right.
these are now eligible. I was like, well, they're all eligible, so why are these different?
No,
So thank you, I understand.
Point
Val,
taken.
did you have a question
Yes,
for
please.
Doug
Thank
as
you,
well?
Mr.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on that example, on the Martin Luther King, the 1.3 that's left over, that's going on phase 2, does this mean that Denver accepts the 7.1, irregardless whether they get funding on the second phase or not? Yes. And that's a yes.
That's
Here
correct,
from Denver.
yes.
Okay.
Okay, Doug, if you could continue then. I just thought, I apologize for interrupting, because we were talking about that, and I know when I saw the confusion on some faces, just to understand, it's just those two examples, and it's that spillover that we've just talked about. But yes, all the ones that are in white that are not hashed through are eligible for phase 2.
Right, that's exactly right.
Please proceed, Doug.
Yeah. Now the other, oh shoot. The last point I might make on this is, yeah, and the chairman alluded to it, the ones that are hashed are struck out. All those projects, with the exception of the Broomfield project, that one was not eligible for as an operation project simply because it was over a mile in length. The other projects, like on page 2, the Denver and Wheat Ridge projects on the roadway operational improvement category, these projects were elements of a project that was funded in some other category. That makes sense. So for example, like the Wheat Ridge projects, those operational projects, those are actually covered as an element of the Wheat Ridge capacity project that was funded at the top of page 2. That makes sense, everybody? Okay. All righty. So just to give you a heads up on the schedule, and yes, this really is about first phase today. What we hope to get from you all today is a recommendation on the projects for first phase to bring forth to the board for their approval. We'd also like your determination on what we should do with the remaining $7.8 million that's available in first phase. Which, as you'll note, within the table, I can pull it up here real quick. I know you can't see this very well, but there are several of the categories. Get to it right here. Several of the categories, for whatever reason, there's a balance of monies left. So, for example, there's nothing on there. Oh, I'm sorry. I tried to make it big enough for you, and I guess that didn't work. Like in the bicycle pedestrian category, for example, we have $679 million, and that was alluded to during public comment. $1,000. What did I say? Million?
It doesn't matter what you
Problem solved. Yeah, no doubt.
say.
That's right. Right, and the reason for that is because we did reach out to Boulder, and their next project in line is $6 million. And for obvious reasons, they didn't feel they could scale back a project of that nature to the degree that they needed to in order to fit it under the $679,000. But there are other categories like the reconstruction project, for example, projects category, for example, where we only had 4 projects submitted, and those projects were certainly all eligible and funded, and it left a balance of $5.4 million available in that category. So you add up all the balances that existed, and we get to just under $7.8 million. And just so you know, historically, what has been the case is we've rolled that money into second phase, but that's to your discretion, certainly.
So as I understand what you're saying, then the total, and on your chart you spell it out clearly at the top of table 1, the grand total for phase 1, that's 75% we've been talking about, is the $131 million. The unallocated balance, where you have these stub amounts available in different categories, is just under $7.8 million. And when you have total funding available in Phase 2, that $51,497,000, that does not include the $7.8 million at this point.
No, it does.
It does. That is the 7. Okay. So the assumption as presented on this chart is that, as we have done historically, you roll the remaining unallocated balance from Phase 1 into Phase 2. That's the $7.8 million for a total of $51.5 million. The staff's recommendation is what?
Well, based on just historical precedents, I mean, it would be certainly our preference, and maybe if you need a recommendation, to roll that in the second phase. But we're not opposed to
the committee to
Sure.
discuss and make a recommendation. Our process here is to make a recommendation to the board. The board makes the final call on that. Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman, Ron, do we have a total of the unfulfilled commitments from the 3 projects that are in blue? What was the total of that?
That's a good question. We could do it real quick. Get calculators and phones working as we speak.
Well, I would recommend that we look at fully funding those programs, since the money is in Phase 1 out of the 7.5. Or just the Arapahoe one would be fine with me.
Just for purposes of math, what you're suggesting, so that we're all on the same page, if you look at page 2, you're talking about the 2 items in blue, and you're recommending the 1.3 and the 3.9 be used up out of that unallocated amount, just so I understand the question. Commissioner.
I was wondering, before we get to that, if we could have staff respond to the several folks that spoke in public comment about the unallocated portion of the bike ped. If there's a project that's next in line underneath the one that can't use the remaining bit that could be fully funded, it does seem logical that we might want to fully allocate bike ped to bike ped projects. And I thought that's how historically we'd done it. Maybe not, but maybe if you could respond to that.
Well, it's funny. I mean, this is my first cycle, but I don't believe, just talking to people this morning when we found out about this, that it really hasn't come up before. But it's not something we would be opposed to. It. I mean, it's logical in some respects. I mean, I certainly understand the perspective of approaching it that way.
Jackie.
And I actually think it is very logical, but I actually think the process would be cleaner if we rolled the money over. I think Superior is a small community, and I think the project's going to score well and do well, and I think to bastardize our process is just going to create more problems, because then I might argue that, well, gee, if there is roadway money left, there's a Lone Tree project that's $6.4 million, and there's $5.5 million left in roadway reconstruction, so gee, why don't I'm sure Lone Tree would take that 5.5 and only have 1 million to make up. So I think Superior is in standing position. I think it makes a lot of sense. That project, if it scored the way it scored, it's going to compete well in Phase 2, and I just think it's cleaner to allow the Phase 2 process to move forward.
And I'm sorry, who else other than I'm sorry, Herb, please, Mr. Mayor.
The proposal that you made with the 2 projects that are partially funded, taking part of that 7, rolling over and full funding those, if you took that and you also took into account what Elise is proposing, that brings up to 5.8. Any idea what do you want to do with the rest of it? Just roll it?
I think at that point we could roll. What I'm suggesting is that we just use a clean process. Let's not partially fund a program that is eligible for fully funding, and start with a clean slate in Phase 2. Whatever money is left over on the unfinished projects, after we've taken care of those 2 that are almost that are partially funded, up to, I think, it's almost 82% of the project is already funded. It just makes logic that why have to go back and compete again since it fell into the category. So I would just make, at this point, maybe make a motion that be done, and whatever is left over be rolled over.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Is that a second?
Clarifying question. Does your proposal include the 600,000?
Until there's a second, maybe we don't even need a clarifier. I mean, I want to know if there's a... Okay, then we have a second. Okay, now you can ask the question of Commissioner Holland to ask him to clarify.
I needed to know before I decided. Does the proposal you made include the 600,000 going to the Superior project, or is it just the two in blue?
I would... the true and blue is the one that I was considering.
Okay.
So the motion relates to the two blues, and that reaches approximately 5.2 million, I believe, is the math on that. I had John, George, Tim, Elise, and Sue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'm not speaking of the motion, but speaking in general. I guess I'd ask staff again, how do we get to this process, this traditional process of just rolling over the funds, other than it's just been done historically? Because again, I'm a traditionalist. I would much rather see the tradition continue, because we do have a criteria which we've put together in phase 2 that should flesh out any of the additional monies being allocated.
And I think that was in order, John, because I heard that as a comment against the motion, actually, in saying you wanted to keep the process as is. George, I had you next.
I'll speak against the motion just because we went into a lot of effort to try to allocate these funds, and I realized we were doing it kind of in a vacuum. We were just playing around with generic percentages, but we were making deals with ourselves based on those percentages. I say let's roll it over, guys. Let's roll it over. The remaining projects then are eligible for phase 2, but let's have them evaluated under that phase 2 criteria and keep the promises we've been making to ourselves, all summer long.
Thank you. I had Tim next, and Bill, you're going to follow Sue. I have Tim.
Sure, I will also speak against the motion. And I would also, just speaking for the city of Boulder, we are very willing to move out of the way. We are the 30th in Colorado, is just below the green, and have that 600,000 go to Superior, which would fully fund their project. And I think it's appropriate for it to be in phase 1.
Thank you. I have Elise next, and Robin's going to follow Bill.
I guess I would respectfully also oppose the motion. Jack, you made the point that all of these should favorably play in phase 2. They're the next in line to be funded in their respective categories. And I guess we allocated money by category for phase 1, and there's some, I think there's some logic to that, and maybe that we should respect that category. That having been said, I do think it still makes sense to fully fund all of the bike ped projects that are eligible to fund out of the bike ped pot. If we can do that, it seems only logical to do that.
Thank you. And then I had Sue, and then Bill and Robin.
Thank you. One of the most important things to me, and I think one of the things we tried to do in this tip process, was address the issue that came up over and over and over in the last tip process, which was essentially deal making on the fly. And every time we had some extra money, it came back in, and then we'd change our rules. So one of the things we did in this process, I think, and it could be my misunderstanding, was say, phase 1 is very defined. It's very rigid. We've already set the criteria, and once that happens, based on that criteria, staff goes through the applications and makes the awards. Phase 2, on the other hand, is a fairly flexible process. We set aside that money specifically to address some of those issues, some of the inequities that might have occurred with a more rigid process in phase 1. And I think it's really important that we don't abandon that at the very first opportunity. I really think if that's what we wanted to do, if we wanted to have a process that was twofold, one of which was fairly rigid based on your scores, and the other of which allowed us the flexibility to make some more subjective, if you might say, decisions, that's what we ought to stick with. And so for that reason, at least for one round of tips, I'd like to see us try that. And so for that reason, again, respectfully, I too would vote against the motion.
All right. The movement, Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand my concern is finishing and completing projects rather than leaving them hanging. I would also look to Boulder to say I would be happy to accept a friendly amendment on the bike path as well.
So that would require the consent of the second as well, so Mayor Rakowski would have to agree to that, which I assume he does, which means that the motion before you would raise the stakes in the game to $5.8 million. It takes the two blues and it moves them up, and then it adds the $600,000 for the Superior project and moves it up above the Boulder project pursuant to their agreement. First of all, does everybody understand the motion? Okay.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Point of order.
Val.
I didn't hear the motion, the person in motion actually amend his motion. He just said that he would accept a motion from Boulder.
He would accept. Point of order is well taken. That's true. The chair was anticipating that Boulder would, in fact, through its commissioner, want that result, but that overstated the case on my part, didn't it? Commissioner?
I would prefer to continue hearing the debate before I make that move. I appreciate it being offered. We are horse trading so much, I'd like to hear the debate first and then decide if we're actually going down that path.
All right. Well, and I believe that Robin would like to speak in at this point anyway, and I think I have Tim after I have Shakti.
I actually was going to suggest amending the motion, so we're headed in the right direction. And here's why. I would not be able to vote for what you described if we were moving money from a bike ped place, for example, to roadway. I'm comfortable with what Bill has proposed, in part because $5.4 million is left over from roadway projects. So to me, I don't want to take money from bike ped and move it to roadway. I wouldn't have been comfortable voting for something that might be perceived as doing that. I actually don't see that this is deal making. In my opinion, deal making is I'll cut my project in half so that you can fund two of yours and you vote for me and I vote for this. What I think we're debating actually is whether you should fund the next ranked project with dollars dedicated for that type of project. That to me is not deal making. It's simply saying we set aside $679,000 and we have a $600,000 project. So I think this is about how do you fulfill the vision. So George, you mentioned you feel like we made up a thing and we should stick to it. I think the way you stick to it is you fund the $600,000 project. If we don't do that, here's what we risk. We risk $679,000 going away from bike ped in phase 2 because we don't know what will happen in phase 2. It is the Wild West. And so I actually don't think it's deal making. I don't think it's horse trading. I think you want to stick to what we said, which is that we're going to spend $679,000 more on bike ped, and the next one in line is Superior. So I would suggest amending the motion to include it, in which case then I would be supporting the motion. So thank you.
So is that actually, Robin, your request for a friendly amendment to which Bill has already exercised his right to accept that friendly amendment? As I understand it, the seconder to the motion has already indicated an acceptance of that friendly amendment. It stands so amended. So Elise can still think about it, but we have the motion amended. That's right. Shakti, you are
at some instinctive level, I like the idea of, to the extent it makes sense, keeping phase 1 money in phase 1 and phase 2 money in phase 2. I appreciate what Sue's saying about the whole point of phase 1 is that it's a rigid process. And so my feeling is if we are going to make decisions about where money that's left over from different categories goes, we should be making decisions about the aspects of the process that need clarification, and that then changes our process. So currently our process is we look at the person one down, and if they don't want the money, then, or if they can have the money if they want. So the question is, do we change our process so that within that same category you look at the next person down? So like our earlier discussions that were conceptual, that out of, not just in this case, but in general, does this process make sense? That I think we need to think about it at that level.
Thank you. Commissioner Tim Mock.
So as someone that doesn't have a dog in this fight, I'm looking to insert mine. I guess, and I don't always understand the process since I don't go through this process. At the end of the day, you don't see Clear Creek County's name on this list. In regards to this conversation, I guess because we don't have any precedent here, I would caution about what type of precedent this sets. And this is obviously clean this time around. Next time around, what does that mean? To that end, though, I do agree with the commissioner from Boulder County and others regarding the bike ped funding. I mean, I really do think that bike ped funding is small enough as it is, and we should be funding that. And I wish we could be more clean about how we utilize those funds and keep everything in that pot to the end, rather than just sort of then mixing it in with the general. So that's my comment.
Jackie?
And I guess I'm going to ask the board for once to trust the process, and I think speak to what Sue was discussing. In my tenure at the board, where we tend to get frustrated with each other and different board members and ideas, is if we think a process hasn't been fair, and that we outlined a process, we said this was the process we were going to be adhering to, and I actually think if we trust this process, Superior is going to get funded, and I think that the partially funded projects are going to get funded. And frankly, may I suggest that maybe those entities would say, gee, we've gotten a lot out of this pool. We've already figured out with our staffs that we can make it work partially funded. There may be additional money that could be spent on bike ped or additional roadway projects or something else. And I guess instead of us being afraid of the process, which we continue to do at this table, and then continue to have frustrations, I really, as the chair of the organization, could not more strongly say, please trust the process and let it play out. And maybe we can send a message moving forward that we can be more productive at this table instead of spending all of this time. And whether you want to call it horse trading or whatever you want to call it, it really isn't clean. And I think you're right, Tim. It will potentially establish precedents as we move forward on other issues where it isn't clean. And the Superior project sounds like a great bike ped project. But to skip over a project in a category and then say we're going to fund the next one, to me is just not appropriate, because then I would argue you should be doing it in every single other category where there's money left over. Let's find the next project on the list that could meet that amount. And that may not be the best, highest use of our dollars. So I will be voting against the motion and encouraging you all to agree with me.
Yes. And do recall that whatever this body agrees upon is simply a recommendation to the full board. This matter will be brought before the full board next week. That's why this meeting is held today, because we do have to make this determination next week relative to Phase 1. And I just want to emphasize again, we're not dealing with Phase 2 at this point. There's a sliver of money that we're talking about. And the question is, are you going to roll that over into Phase 2, as Jackie has suggested, or will you take some portion of that sliver and work some accommodations now? I would, unless anyone else has a time to speak, I'll take a minute myself. And not seeing anyone raise their hand right now, let me just say that the one thing that I do note in support of Jackie's observation is that the blue projects have been contacted and have acknowledged their willingness to accept this result and go into Phase 2. There is also some sense that the $600,000 project for Superior probably, no one can make a statement of certainty on that, would be treated well in Phase 2. That said, I also recognize and accept Commissioner Holen's comment that, well, we're here now, why don't we fix this and get it done? And I think that's really the question that you have. But recognize you will be having this discussion 1 week from today with the board as a whole. So do understand that however this body proceeds to chooses to proceed, it will nonetheless be a discussion that will be somewhat replicated, hopefully in shorter version, next week. That having been said, any further comments on the motion? For purposes of this record, let me restate the motion then. The motion is to take the two projects outlined in blue, specifically being the Martin Luther King project in Denver under roadway capacity projects, remaining amount, and the Arapahoe County Iliff Avenue Corridor Operational Improvements project listed under roadway operational improvement projects, together with the Superior Trail McCaslin BRT station to Coal Creek listed under bicycle and pedestrian projects on page 1 of Table 1, and to fund those projects out of the otherwise unallocated balance from Phase 1 at this time as a recommendation to the board. Are there questions about the motion? If not, are you prepared for a vote? Anticipating that that is an affirmative response, all those in favor will try a voice. You want hands? Okay, she wants hands. Okay. So we're going to do what Connie wants. All those in favor, please indicate by raising your hands. All those in favor, please indicate by raising your hands. I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4. I saw 4. I saw, did I see you, George? Or were you? No. Okay. I'm sorry. I wasn't sure. I saw Marakowski.
You sure, George?
Okay. You were getting ready. Okay. All right. Okay. And all those opposed to the motion, please raise your hand. Okay. I think it's fairly obvious that the noes have it in this case. We're back to the discussion. We do not have a motion on the table. We're back to the discussion of how to treat the total unallocated balance. I saw Sue Horn's hand first, then I saw Commissioner Jones, and then I saw Shakti. Sue.
So I would move to recommend to the Board of Directors the approval of the 2016-2021 Transportation Improvement Program first phase projects as submitted, and to recommend to the Board of Directors that we allocate the remaining first phase funds to Phase 2 of the TIP project.
Second.
We have a motion. We have numerous seconds that have been noted. Do you wish to speak to the motion, Sue, before I recognize Elise?
I think I've already spoken. I was going to raise my hand and say I'll see your 50 and go all in and tell you that Bennett will be happy to take whatever money you've spilled on the floor here. But
for the sake of the record, I'll just note that I think for the very first time, perhaps in the history of DRCOG, the words Cherry Hills Village appear under bicycle and pedestrian projects. Alas and alack, down the list, some distance under bicycle and pedestrian projects, but nonetheless there. Elise.
I'm prepared to support the motion, but I would like to amend the motion to fully spend out the Phase 1 pot for bike ped by funding the Superior project. And I would say well, I should see if there's a second for that amendment. Well, I don't know if it's friendly, but if it is friendly.
So I really
You've been
would rather
recognized
not.
as a motion to amend.
I would rather not
I
have
understand that,
amendments.
but
I
she's
mean,
got the
I just
right
think
to
this
make.
is a.
Okay, but
It's
I'm
not a
hoping
friendly
it gets
amendment.
phased and funded in Phase 2. I think it should, but I don't want to dilute the process before we've even tried it. I just think it's important, to Jackie's point, to try trusting it one time and see if we can't make it work.
So I hear you. I do have a second, so if I could speak in support of my
Tim.
amendment.
Boulder
I
has
think this,
coalesced. We have Elise and Tim ready to roll.
this is really not about Boulder County. It's about bike ped in the categories, and I think this is about respecting Phase 1. As Doug indicated, we haven't really come into this situation before where you have an unallocated amount, you ask the next project down, they say no, and you could fully fund the project after that, and the folks in between that can't take the money are fine with that. And there is no other category where this applies, because there's no other, in all of the roadway capacity operations, et cetera, there is no opportunity to do the same thing. So I would argue we are keeping with the Phase 1 spirit. We just didn't fully implement it. And we have decided that we've already agreed that we want to spend these amounts on these different categories in Phase 1. We have the opportunity to fully fund the amount of money we said in bike ped in Phase 1. It doesn't seem logical to me to not go ahead and do that. So I think it isn't fully in keeping with the Phase 1 process to do this. And I support carrying over the rest in Phase 2, as Jackie and Sue have argued. But I do think this is Phase 1 consistent.
All right, thank you. I
So
have
just point of
Shakti.
order.
Point of order?
I'm not a Robert's Rules expert, but
It's okay, I am.
But I didn't. Are you okay? Good. I didn't think you could make an amendment without the agreement of the original.
No,
motion. You can make
it's
a
a motion
to
to
replace.
amend, and she received a second, and we
Okay.
are now debating the motion to amend. So I did have, and I have Shakti, if you wish to speak to the amendment, and just for the sake of the record, I have Shakti, Kathy, Jackie, George, and Ashley. Okay. All right. So let's first go to Shakti
My comments aren't on the amendment, so I'll wait.
and Tim Mock. Sorry. All right. And Shakti, because you were speaking to the main motion and not to the motion to amend, so you want to.
Well, I don't even know if it's the main motion. It's sort of the underlying issue of, I think it'd be a different thing to say we should change our process so that we look at the top 3 in a rolling order instead of just the top 1, instead of saying, right now, this time we want to take this project, so that we're talking about our process over the long term instead of the individual situation. And I think that no matter what happens today, maybe we should revisit this issue of process in particular.
Thank you. That point well taken. Kathy Noon, Mayor.
So I would agree, because if we're saying we're just going to go down and do the next one and there's no other this time, well, we could go back and just ask for more projects for reconstruction. There's a bunch of money left there, and we could just go out for a second round. But that's not what we decided. We spent a lot of time in this room and trying to make this process. So, and Centennial has no dog in this fight either. We don't have any projects. So we're fine. There's a study way down there, but that's not even eligible. I have been this process person all along, and so the very first time we're ready to use it, we're not using it. And so I do not find value sitting here making these processes up. So I'm with Shaki. If you want to change the process next time, we change the process, but we should follow it and honor it and see how it works, and then that will tell us what would be better fixes for the next time. Thanks.
Thank you. I have Jackie, George, Ashley, and then Tim Mock.
So, no shock, I'm not in favor of amending Sue's motion. And again, I feel not to be repetitive, but we need to trust the process. And with all due respect to staff and Lisa, your comment that this has never happened before, it actually probably has happened before. Nobody's ever asked that we do it this way before. And to me, it is a process issue. And I think we need to be clean in the process. And to do what you're asking, then I would argue that we dedicate that $5.4 million to roadway in phase 2, because basically that's what you're asking. The way I'm looking at it from a logic standpoint is you're asking to dedicate something that should be rolling into phase 2. If we were going to historically do what we've always done, that is what we've always done. With all due respect to Doug, he wasn't here for the last time this happened, frankly, and I unfortunately came in at the tail end of it, and there was a lot of horse trading at the table, and projects did move around, and I think people left the table feeling really bitter about it, and I kind of agree with Kath's comment. Then let's go out and ask for more reconstruction projects. If we're really going to be dedicating money to what we said, then you know. And I just think it just gets messy. I just think it's we're messy, messy, messy again. Let's keep it clean. Let's keep it simple. And I just also want to add editorially, I've talked to staff about this. We do want to do a post-mortem on the tip and these issues that have been raised at the end of it, and the application of scoring and what worked and what didn't work. And TAC is going to be a part of it, and board members are going to be a part of it as well. So I do think the post-mortem on the process and lessons learned and how we can potentially influence this process in the future for when, God help any of you that are still here, the next time this tip happens. So, against the motion, in favor of the postmortem on the process.
Thank you, Jackie. George.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too would like to speak against this amendment to the motion, and really for the same reasons that I stated earlier, speaking to the main motion of let's keep the promises we made to ourselves. Obviously, I'm a new board member. I've been drinking from the fire hose all year since being appointed in May. Over and over again, I was told this first phase really is about the raw scoring. When I look at the raw scores, unfortunately, we do have another project that would get in the way of Superior's, scores higher than Superior's project. And that's actually in roadway operational improvements. And that's a Douglas County program that scores a 76. So again, I speak against the motion because, again, it breaks the promises we've been making to ourselves, at least as we were going through this process all summer long.
Thank you very much. And then Ashley?
First, I just want to say I think this project will be funded one way or another, regardless of what comes out of it. It's a very great project, and I think it will score really well in the second round with small community, and I think we all feel that way. So that kind of takes some of the pressure off me being the next door neighbor and not wanting them to hate my guts. But I think it is a really important philosophical thing to try to use the phase 1 criteria, and I think it's important that we try to spend as much phase 1 money as we can in phase 1, but if there's money left over, I think I'm in favor of rolling it forward. I hope that we all watch the Superior project in round 2 and make sure that what we think will happen does happen, because it seems like if we let the process work, it should work in this case, and if it doesn't, I guess that gives us even more to look on how to improve this going forward. I do like Shotke's idea of looking at this further and deciding if in the future we do want to roll to the next projects, if that's the way we want to go. I think we need to talk about that more and have some more understanding of what that would mean.
Thank you very much. I have Tim Mock next.
Yeah, hi, me again, Tim Mock, Lickery County. I'm going to take a bit of a different approach here because I think that I respect the process and I understand that. The bike ped dollars are very unique and very different from road projects, whether it's road construction, new construction, whatever. I think that in terms of process, because these dollars, again, I go back to it's far and few between, and we ought to take those opportunities to fund these. And I'll say that in terms of precedent, that and it looks like I agree that Superior probably has a strong chance at getting funded, but if they don't, or the next time around you have 2 roadway projects that are in front of a bike ped project, we're going to be discussing this all over again. And so I do think it is something that we ought to keep in mind and keep those dollars to bike ped.
I have Bob Pfeiffer next.
So I kind of have a dog in this fight, because if we were to take the amendment, and say that the second person down doesn't want the money, then technically, by dollar amounts, I am the next one beyond Superior. So where do you draw the line of letting it roll and roll? I think we've said it, but let's just clearly show that we could be down on number 45 that ends up getting funded. We are kind of dealing in a way, because then I would argue I want the money. And that's not where DRCOG needs to go. We need to think regionally. We need to think beyond that. And we've got to stick with the process. I do agree that the process needs to be followed and have faith in it. And so Arvada will be voting against the amendment.
I suppose I might say that just for old lang syne, if people would have above Cherry Hills just knocked out, I could have gotten that in too. You know. I guess we're not there.
Mr.
George,
Chairman, aren't those bike paths operated by chauffeurs?
They're those tandem bikes. Yeah. I love it. Yeah, if I don't have Ned Applebaum, I need somebody to pick up on it that way.
I called the question.
All right, the question has been called. This is on the motion to amend. So do you wish to terminate debate on the motion to amend? Not debatable. If you are in favor of stopping debate and voting on the motion to amend, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Are you opposed? Say nay. None are opposed. Therefore, we turn to the motion to amend. The amendment is to take the $600,000 Superior project and fund it out of the 679 allocated funds for bike ped projects, and to roll the balance forward into Phase 2. So the motion focuses on the 600,000. Those in favor of the motion to fund the 600,000, please raise your hands. I see 5. Those opposed, please raise your hands. I see more than 5. And so we will take those as opposed, and that motion to amend fails. We're back at the main motion, which was made by Mayor Horn, which is to roll forward. Is there further discussion on the main motion? I have Robin, then I have Tim Plass.
Just wanted to say that even though I voted for the other motions because I thought they were slightly better, this is still a very good motion, and I will happily, as a good sport, be supporting it. You all made good points, right? There's just a slightly better version, but it's okay. I'm totally all in.
Thank you for sharing that, Robin. Tim.
So I'm with Robin. I'll be supporting the motion as well, and I think it's a good one. I did just want to bring up one concern that the city of Boulder had. And that was in the what we felt was a change in interpretation with regard to the criteria. And we don't want to go back and reopen Phase 1, but we just did have some concerns, particularly with our project that was just below the line there, with regard to the gap closure and barrier elimination. And when our staff self-scored, we thought we had 13. And I sound really parochial here, but I just want to get this out on the table because I think it's a process issue. When we self-scored, we thought we had 13 and we got 0 points. And so just concerned about what we thought was a change in interpretation with regard to the criteria, the failure to be able to get partial points, and really no chance to address what we felt was the change with any kind of amendment. So I just wanted to put that out there, and I hope that moving forward into the post-mortem, Jackie talked about that, that we can we hopefully address this, and I had a chance to talk to staff offline too, so really like to just kind of get this cleared up so that expectations are clear for communities. And also, hope that we can also think about this in Phase 2 a little bit. So that's it, and I'll be happy to support the motion.
Thank you. I have Val, and then I have Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And George.
I don't know when it's appropriate. I wanted to talk a little bit about the the request from CDOT of the $5 million when it goes to the pot two. I'm not sure whether I support the amendment, okay, to begin with. Whether that then stops any recommendations to the TAC that they at least consider the request from CDOT. Whether that's going to stop it at all whatsoever and it just goes flat out to phase two with no other input. Will I have the opportunity to make that recommendation to the members here later on?
And Val, you're definitely free to do that. Right now, the motion that is presented to us is to approve the Phase 1 projects as listed and to roll over the unallocated balance of approximately $7.8 million into the Phase 2 funding and to present that as a recommendation to the board at the meeting 1 week from tonight. That's what's actually on the table. But just as Elise made a motion to amend and others have, you're absolutely free to do that. But right now I have Bill and then George and then I have Jackie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be supporting this this vote today enthusiastically, I may add. I know that it's that we've worked very hard to provide a equitable process. My concern was clearly parochial, as everybody probably understands. However, I think that I'd like to see money spent in the phase that it was initially allocated toward, simply because I just don't like leaving partial projects sitting out there that could be completed. It's jobs, it's improved transportation opportunities for my county, and I will yield to the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill. I next have George, then Jackie, then Elise.
Call the question, Mr. Chairman.
Question has been called. There is no debate on the calling of the question. The question is now on the main motion to approve the preliminary project selected in Phase 1 and to agree to the rollover of the unallocated balance of $7.8 million into Phase 2 as a recommendation to be made to the board for discussion on 1 week from tonight. All those who wish to terminate the debate and proceed to a vote, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those who are opposed to terminating debate, please indicate by saying nay.
Nay.
All right. The ayes appear to have it. Is there question? The ayes have it. We will then turn to a vote on the main question. The main motion is to approve the preliminary project selected in Phase 1 and to roll over the unallocated balance of approximately $7.8 million into the Phase 2 balance and make that as a recommendation to the board. All those in favor of the main motion, please raise your hands. Let me ask, are there any opposed to that motion? Seeing none, the record should reflect that the motion passes unanimously. And please recognize that the board has this for full discussion on the 17th. Some of the points that are made, I'm sure, will be made again, but hopefully we have the benefit of this discussion. I'm sorry? And okay, Herb first, then Jackie.
Just to go back for a moment to Val's question. We've had a request from CDOT to request that we take a look at a $5 million funding packet. I'm not sure where we would get that from, but I would like to recommend that we consider that, but who's the right group to consider it? To me, we'd send it back to the TAC group, look for some recommendation back from them, and then them bring it back to us and then up to the board. I don't know how to get that there other than it's a discussion item. I'm not looking for a motion because that's all it was brought for was, hey, would you consider this? And I'd like to see us at least look at it.
And it looks like Jackie has a comment at the ready.
Well, that's what I was actually raising my hand before we voted on to talk about. I do think we need to acknowledge the request that was made tonight, and I think we need to talk about it in the context of probably not just the it's my understanding a lot of the ramp projects are falling short in the metro area, and I'm not sure where those monies are going to be coming from, and I'm not sure what the shortfall is, and I'm not sure that CDOT's put funding packages together for all of the projects that are going to be falling short under ramp. And I think it is a discussion that we need to have at this table about what we think the best process will be to handle it. And I realize it's an opportune time right now because we're talking about funding projects, so they're at the ready to go. But I think we need to think about the implications that are going to be coming with all of these ramp projects as they are falling short. And I'm not prepared to have that discussion tonight, but I do think the discussion needs to occur. And I also think we need to think about, you know, should we require additional local matches if they're going to be coming for, and I'm not suggesting it, okay, I'm just throwing it out there that these are the things I think we need to consider as part of that process. Should we require an additional local match of some amount for these projects? Should we have a real understanding of what all the projects are, et cetera, et cetera? Not ready to have it. We need to have it, though. That's all I'm suggesting.
I guess I was just under the impression that when there was a shortfall, the Department of Veteran Affairs was going to
Holy
ouch. Over.
Mr. Chairman, I object.
Isn't that how that works? Okay, I'm sorry. I saw Val's hand and then I saw Sue's.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And all I was talking about was the issue of we need to have that discussion that Jackie was talking about. But I think the discussion starts at the TAC. They're the ones that start the initial review. They're the technical people that come back to us with suggestions. We can have the discussion here after the TAC has gone over the details and deciphered what's good, what's not good. All we are asking right now is that we, I guess, direct TAC to take a look at this request in conjunction with all of the other projects that have been submitted already. They're under consideration for Phase 2. So that's what we're really talking about.
And
so I do think this is a larger issue because we've had the luxury for about 6 years now of almost every project coming in under budget because we were in a tight financial situation and people were undercutting each other to get contracts awarded. We're not in that situation now, so this is going to be much bigger than just this $5 million. Every single one of these projects that is estimated here could end up coming in over budget. So I think it is a larger discussion as we move down the road to say, what do? We award money in good faith. If they come in over budget, how does that get handled? Obviously, if we funded them all, we could skip these discussions for the next few years because we'd use all our tip money. So I'm agreeing. I don't know if TAC is where it starts, but I think it needs to be a long-range discussion that says how does this get handled.
Thank you. Any further observations on that? I think we have vetted that, and I think we have a clear understanding that we can participate with TAC in terms of giving them some opportunity to weigh in on this subject and share back with both MVIC and the board. If you are ready, we can turn next to our informational item. Wait. Oh, wait. I'm sorry. Mr. Rex has more.
Well,
Doug.
Just real quickly, I don't want to belabor this, but I would like to just quickly go over the schedule with you all. And the chairman is correct. We appreciate your action today, and that will be transmitted to the board for their action next week. And then after that, assuming we do get approval from the board next week, we will TAC in conjunction with staff will begin to develop some scenarios for your consideration at your January 7th MVIC meeting. That is a big meeting, guys. I mean, we really need to come out of that meeting with a second phase criteria, or sorry, with a recommendation for second phase projects. So. Jackie's right. I wasn't here last time. I don't know how much discussion and debate there is in that meeting, but I assume quite a bit. So it may be a longer meeting than the 2 hours. I don't know, but you might. 3 might want to, yeah. We actually even talked about that.
We're teeing it up nicely for Bob Roth.
So that is a very big meeting, because in order for us to meet the schedule that we need to meet in order to get this into the state transportation improvement program, we need to have the TIP approved by the March board meeting. So there's a public hearing element to that. So you back up months. It really forces us to get something through the January MVIC and board on projects. So I just wanted to lay that out there, and that's it.
All right. Thank you very much. Are there any questions of Doug relative to the schedule? Yes, Jackie.
So, Doug, can you just flip back to the December, January? So just to put an exclamation point behind what Doug just said, we're selecting the projects at January 7th, which means that we've got to come up with how we're going to prioritize Phase 2 projects a week from today.
Good point.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that's clear to everyone that we are leaving that meeting next Wednesday with the recommendation from the board on how we are going to score Phase 2 projects. So just really be prepared for a thoughtful discussion on that topic next Wednesday.
Yeah. Thank you, Jackie.
Right.
Pardon?
We've only discussed it 6 times.
Bring jammies. Yeah, I know. I just want to make sure everyone hears that and make sure they're here to participate in that discussion because it's important.
And let us not forget that the board meeting next week starts at 4 p.m. 4 p.m. The discussion could be much shorter if people forgot that and showed up at 6:30 p.m., but in fairness and full disclosure spirit, 4 p.m. The idea being that there is an open house that DRCOG is hosting in the newly designed offices both across the hall on the east side and up on the 7th floor. So please keep that in mind. We turn then, if I may, any further discussions? Doug is ready? Okay, good. So now we have, excuse me, forgive me, presentation on travel trends. And for this, we turn to our MPO Planning Program Manager and Transportation Planning and Operations, Mr. Steve Cook. Good evening, Mr. Cook.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And you'll be glad to know there's no action on this item. I don't expect any horse trading, deal making, or anything like that. Just for information. But it is information that we have been asked about over the last several months on some aspects of trends in travel in the Denver region. This is attachment C. There's a memo in there on this topic. There's kind of 3 subtopics that we're going to talk about. They're all interrelated. I'm going to cover the first 2, and Colleen Miller of our DRCOG Way to Go staff will cover the final item. So with that, our first topic is VMT, or vehicle miles traveled. That is, it's basically how much do we drive here in the Denver region. And we've been tracking this for many years. Though before we go to the Denver region, we're going to look at the United States as a whole because we have numbers that go back a lot farther for the U.S., where Federal Highway Administration has been tracking this ever since there really was horse trading, I guess, with cars back in the 19-teens and 20s. So from a national perspective, get this here, we look at data sources from U.S. Department of Transportation, and these are numbers in trillions of miles per year. So the numbers are pretty meaningless. I have no idea what 3 trillion miles even means. I just can't grasp that. So we really want to look at the trend here. And the key thing here is that basically since the internal combustion engine was invented, we've been going up in terms of vehicle miles traveled of motor vehicles. Only 3 times have we had flattening in that, or dips or decreases in the VMT, the amount driven in the United States. We had that during World War II. A couple years it went down, had gas rationing then, but it picked up pretty quick. It was really only a couple years before it picked back up. The other red arrow there was in the energy crises of the 70s, dipped for a year, came back up, dipped again, and came back up. And now here we are today, the last 8 or so years, where it's gone down a little, it's flattened out, seems like it's going up maybe a little bit the last couple of years, and actually this year it looks like it's going to go up. You know, a lot of factors there, economy improving, gas prices are down at least right now. So this is really the longest period of time, the last 7 or 8 years, that we've had basically flat total VMT in the country. When we look at the Denver region itself, and this is what's in the report that was attached to your memo, we're looking at just the last 13 years. Sorry, I've been here a while, but I don't have data going back to 1920 for the Denver region. We see a very similar pattern. First of all, this is daily vehicle miles of travel. So today, on the left side there, it's about 70 million miles are driven a day in the entire DRCOG region. So it includes Clear Creek County, goes all the way out, so about 70 million miles a day. Okay. It had been going up extremely sharply all the way through about 2005, 2006, and then that's where it really started flattening out. That's the blue line there. Last couple of years, we're seeing it start to tick back up. You know, it's not at the rate of growth that we were at in the 1990s or early 2000s, and we have some preliminary 2014 numbers that show that, you know, increase continuing. Now that's the blue line. That's grand total miles driven. And the red line is we basically take the total miles driven, divide it by the population, and we get VMT per capita. And that's really what we're a little more interested in, and what the board was interested in when they adopted the MetroVision plan, the 2035 plan, and established a goal of seeing that VMT per capita reduce at least 10% by 2035. Well, we're about halfway there in terms of percent from that 2005 starting point. The miles driven per person has gone down, you know, even as our population, because basically our VMT was flat, but our population has been going up the last 7, 8 years. So that's a good sign there in that our per capita VMT is going down, basically flat the last couple of years, and we'll see what happens this year. The second item of information related to travel is how do we get to work in the Denver region? This is another one of the goals in the MetroVision plan. And what we really look at here is information from the U.S. Census Bureau, because they do it every year. They do a really large sample, and it provides pretty solid information. How many years? 9 years ago, we were at about almost 77% of people drive alone as an SOV, a single occupant vehicle, to work. The goal that DRCOG established was to reduce that down to 65%. Now we use transportation to work purely because it's a good surrogate. We know that there's a lot more travel other than driving to work, but we just don't have that data, you know, from a year-to-year basis. So that's why I just wanted to point that out, that that's why we use this transportation to work data. Go forward 8 years, our amount of the SOV, single occupant vehicle pie, has gone down a little bit. Couple percent. So we're making progress.
Jackie, do you have a question?
I do, because actually if you look at this data, it's been fluctuating right around, and I think it's misleading to just look at 2005 and just look at 2013. And I think the same could be said for the other VMT data as well. It really, and I'd like to know what I can't say the word, statistical significance is on these numbers, because I would argue it hasn't changed. I would argue that the VMT hasn't changed, and I would argue that the single occupancy vehicle hasn't changed, and we can't just look at a snapshot in 2005 and a snapshot in 2013. So what is the statistical significance of, and plus or minus, on these numbers?
On this one here,
yeah,
we have not done an official statistical analysis, but when something occurs over such a long time, and I'm focusing on the blue line there.
Yeah.
That's why our conclusion, at least from a staff professional perspective, isn't VMT is declining. It's that VMT, when you look historically, relatively flat the last 7 years.
And then looking like it's trending up.
And that is, and I don't even know if I want to conclude too much in that yet, but it looks like it's going up a little.
Okay.
We'll have better data this year. The thing we used to do with this is in, I think it was 07, when our 07 number came out, people were going, oh, we're flat. I said, well, I'm not going to say we're flat.
Right.
That's 1 year. 2 years,
and the economy and everything else.
Exactly. When we started to hit 3, 4 years, something was happening out there, and I think we all around the country and professionals agreed something's happening. You couldn't pinpoint.
Right. My only thing is I just don't want to, unless you can give me the statistical differences, I don't want to say it's doing anything other than kind of hovering about where it has been hovering for the last 10 years.
And then this one here, probably the better one to look at is this chart that, and we're not going to go through this here, I'm just showing that this is what was in your table, is, it appears to be down slightly, the SOV number, the first row there, it appears that it's down slightly. We're not making grand conclusions that it's down a lot, but it appears consistently down slightly. It's gone up and down, and you can tell that you looked at the numbers very closely. The ones on this table that have changed pretty significantly when we look at the raw numbers in terms of growth is in the transit, bicycle, and work at home. Those ones we really are seeing something. Now it's a smaller percent of the total mode of travel to work, but those ones are going up, and the one that we have clearly seen here and around the country is the bicycling trend. And the best data we have is the census data. They go out and do thousands of surveys every year, and they do these surveys throughout the year. So that's what I point out is a new thing with the census the last 10 years, which is good, is they're doing these surveys throughout the year to get the average number of persons on an average day in the year. So we see that basically a doubling from the numbers in 05 and 06, 10, 15,000 on an average day bicycling to work, is now around 20 to 25,000 per day. So it kind of reflects what we've heard anecdotally, what we've seen out there, that bicycling is going up. A lot of reasons for this. We don't know which exact reasons are the number one reason. The economy, people wanting health and exercise, the millennials, more people that can live closer to their jobs, more facilities out there that we've been funding through the TIP in the last several years and through your local governments, and through encouragement programs that your local governments have been doing, that the Bike to Work Day program has been doing, and we'll talk about that one in a minute. One thing that after Bike to Work Day was held, they did a survey of their participants. We'll hear a little bit more about that in a minute, and looked at, we realized that not everyone can bike everywhere for every trip. It's just not possible. Nobody expects that. But the survey did reveal several barriers. The most logical one of all is weather. Of course, if it's snowing outside a lot, if it's freezing cold, you're not going to be like this guy in the picture. That's an anomaly. That's not your typical thing. Driving is more convenient for many trips. That you can't dispute that. It can take longer if you live a long ways from where you're going, whether it's work or recreation. You may have to drive. There's safety concerns. Conditions of streets were noted in this survey. Not enough bike lanes, not enough bike facilities. Or lighting on bike facilities. Denver region, don't have to look at this map in detail, has a very robust bicycling system compared to other cities. But we know that there are certain connections. We noted that in the survey, people noted lack of connections at key points. And we know that that's a real key thing. You may have some great trails, but you need that one last bridge or that one last underpass. Other things noted, you don't want to come to work sweaty, or your appearance before work, having a helmet hair, is a concern of some, but maybe that's not as much a concern as it used to be. If you have to transport your children to daycare or to school, a lot more difficult, though some people can do it by bicycle. And obviously, just your personal health, your age, not everyone can bicycle, all the time. It's one mode of travel that's out there. With that, I'll turn the next section over to Colleen Miller, who leads DRCOG's Way to Go program and also the Bike to Work Day efforts that are held through that program with your local governments.
Colleen, we welcome you.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. I love talking about one of my favorite subjects, Bike to Work Day. Let's see. So Bike to Work Day, an annual event. DRCOG has been sponsoring this event for more than 20 years. We've come a long way. The first event that we have numbers for, 1995, we had 1,250 participants. This past year, we had 29,000 participants. A little under 20,000 people registered online. People are not required to register online. We encourage them to do that. And then, so we counted an additional 9,600 people. We do counts at the stations. And so we just do actually hard counts. We have the station organizers count. And then we extrapolate from there how many people did not register, what percentage, and then we add them to the total. So we had a little over 29,000 participants this past year. We had 216 stations, breakfast, bike home, and water stations. Those stations were spread throughout the entire community, entire Denver metro area. And those stations are entirely organized by the community. So they can be cities, counties, any kind of municipality, special district, or businesses. So the great thing about the stations is we provide requirements. We go out to businesses and communities and ask them to organize them. So they can be organized by small businesses, from bike shops to yoga studios to accounting firms, auto dealerships, and multinational corporations. So it's a real good way for businesses to get involved in this event. And this year, every year we do a survey of participants, and a lot of people said, I love riding in the morning, but it's just too hot in the afternoon. So we listened, and we had a goal of providing 10 water stations, just water only on the way home. We put the call out and asked communities to help, and we had 23 stations. And it was water only, and we located them strategically on high traffic trails where there are just really no services nearby. So that was very, very successful. A couple of communities that stepped up, Douglas County sponsored 2 water stations, Adams County sponsored 1, and the city of Arvada. So we were very excited about that, and it's something that we definitely will continue in 2015. There we go. We had 7,000 new participants this year, and that was slightly more than the previous year. Obviously, from year to year, we like to get more participants, but it's held steady between 5,000 and 6,000 over the past couple of years, and this year we had 7,000 new participants. And we always like to register that because we have new people coming into the community, and we always like to add people to the event. And based on our results from our survey, and again, it's a pretty detailed survey of registered participants, and we had about 3,000 responses this year. 50% of all participants were motivated to ride more, and that amounted to about 150,000 additional bicycle trips after Bike to Work Day. And that's not just work, that's also for trips for running errands and things like that. It does not include recreational trips. And I know you can't read this, but we did a dot map of, this is the home location of all of the Bike to Work Day participants. So these are the registered participants, 19,000 plus, and this is where they live. So you can see they're all throughout the region, which is very, very exciting to us. It's not just one area. These are the locations of the businesses. So these are the locations that the people commuted to. And then we also have the Bike to Work Day Business Challenge. We had 968 company teams this year. These are businesses that went and registered their company and recruited employees to be on their company team and participate, which is very exciting. Really like to see in 2015 get that number up above 1,000, and I think that we can definitely do that. There's no question about that. Oh, one more thing about, okay, so also too, about the company teams. 28 different towns, cities, and counties either fielded a company team or they organized a Bike to Work Day station. So that's pretty exciting to us. And then about 10 or so special districts also took part. And again, this is an organizing, having a team or organizing a station. One thing that we're really proud of, I'm going to read this because I didn't memorize this. 9 of the 10 companies that won the Denver Business Journal's 2013 Metro Denver Healthiest Employer Awards, and that's for 100 plus employees, cited their company's Bike to Work Day participation as a benefit to their employees. So that's pretty exciting. And not only that, they provided, these 9 to 10 companies provided photos. And they do everything from include Bike to Work Day in a wellness program, or they provide extra encouragement. They'll have incentives to get employees to ride their bikes. So we really feel like this event is very important to employers all throughout the metro area, all sizes of employers, not just the 100 plus, but it's nice when you have a company of 4 and all 4 employees bike to work. It's just, it's a good thing for folks to do. I also wanted to encourage you or your staff to attend our Bike to Work Day open house. It's April 8th. It'll be here in Independence Pass. We'll have a session in the morning and a session in the afternoon. And it's for any company that's interested in participating, anybody that's interested in sponsoring it or organizing a station. And you just come talk with us. And we have a couple other goals for 2015. Did a little bit of it this year. A lot of people in the survey said they wanted to keep the celebration going after they got home from work. So whether it be families wanting to ride to a local shopping district, you know, all together to have dinner, or just people that just want to go out and celebrate, we have a new category called bike parties. So a couple of shopping districts organized bike parties this past year. Stapleton was one. The Orchard Town Center in Westminster was another. We'd really like to get other areas to do it. Just to mention a few, Belmar, the streets at South Glen, the Highlands, Old Town Arvada, the Landmark. Just some examples that are shopping and entertainment districts that it's as simple as, you know, talking to the merchants, seeing if they'll offer some sort of a discount for people who have a Bike to Work Day sticker, wear their shirt, bike, something like that. And we can help organize that. We have lots of good anecdotes and lots of good statistics from the folks that did it this year, what worked, what didn't work. And it's just a way to get more businesses in your community involved in Bike to Work Day. It's a good way for them to get people to patronize their businesses, and it's just another excuse to celebrate. And then one last thing, I'm going to end it really fun here. So these people, their names are Ira and Penny. They met at a breakfast station in Arvada on Bike to Work Day in 2005, and they got married in 2007. So pretty exciting stuff, and we're pretty proud of Ira and Penny.
Did they get married on their bikes? Do we know? I mean,
that's their wedding picture.
That's cool.
Yep.
Jackie.
Okay, you didn't mention Ridgegate and Lone Tree, so I'm a little upset about that. But that wasn't why I raised my hand. I actually have a theory, with no data to support it, that a lot of the traffic on the roads in the morning and the afternoon are also related to education and schools. And have we looked at expanding this about a bike to school day? Because it cracks me up how many parents I see in carpool line dropping kids off and then going to the gym. Okay, and I might have been one of them at some point in my life. So I actually think we have walk to school days, and anyway, it's something just I would like that idea to be discussed.
Well,
I think
there is a National Bike to School Day, and I know, Steve, you worked
we
on it in
do,
the past.
and does DRCOG support that, and do we do any work with that? And you don't have to answer these are just questions. And then the other thing is, what about businesses in Lone Tree, some of the larger businesses now, recognizing that people have to drive there because there's no other way to get to their business, but they are putting in those bike stations, or looking at putting in the bike stations at their offices to then allow their employees to use those instead of driving to go to lunch and work. And what are we doing anything to support that effort?
That's something we can certainly think about. As far as on Bike to Work Day, I mean, you know, celebrations and things like that. Even if people don't ride there, we want people to sort of, you know, get involved and talk to other people about it. So if you can't ride to, you know, a shopping center after work, you know, to go to dinner on Bike to Work Day, we still want to get those businesses involved to encourage biking to work and just to get people together to talk about it.
Okay. Yes, Elise.
I was just going to respond to Jackie that yes, happily DRCOG does support jurisdictions trying to address that. And I meant to send you an email. We get CMAQ funds from DRCOG to do a program called Trip Trackers, where we actually give coupons to kids for the number of times they ride or walk to school, and local businesses participate and give them, you know, like $1 off noodles or whatever thing. So it is something that DRCOG has supported, and it's pretty successful, and we should spread the news.
Our school pool program has about 14,000 families in the metro area enrolled in the school pool program. Boulder Valley School District is unique in that they did involve local businesses to provide those prizes, and they're tracking their trips. But again, about 14,000 families participate. It's mostly just because it's the low-hanging fruit. Charter schools and other schools, private schools that don't have yellow school bus service and are less likely to have a way to get to school. So our school pool program is one of the most successful in the country.
Anything further from Steve or Colleen then on travel trends?
I'd like to give one plug to your question regarding projects. Is we will be having our call for projects for our TDM pool in a few months, and you know that's where we encourage local governments or your transportation management agencies such as the South I-25. And new this round, which you approved a few months ago, is that small infrastructure projects will now be eligible within that TDM pool, and that could be things such as bike stations and things like that. So that was a good lead into that, and that'll be probably in late spring, early summer.
Any other questions for Steve or Colleen on travel trends? If not, turning to other matters, please make a note there is no admin committee meeting next week. We have the board meeting at 4 o'clock. There is not an admin committee meeting, and our next meeting will be on Wednesday, January the 7th, with the auspicious and now absent Bob Roth serving as your chair for that meeting. So for the second time, I thank you all very much for your great support, cooperation, and collaboration in my chairing of the MetroVision Issues Committee. I appreciate it tremendously. It's been my privilege, and we stand adjourned.
And before we go, can we just honor our chairman of this evening? And as I shared with you privately, don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened. And I think we all smile because we had the privilege of serving with you down at the DRCOG board, Doug, and you've done a tremendous job. So thank you.
If you need a parking validation ticket, come and see me.